from the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
We've talked a lot about schools. Schools are operating without students until May 31st, and extracurricular activities have been canceled until May 31st. Also, I issued an executive order that prohibits club sports till May 31st as well. Again, the idea is we want to make sure that we're not mixing those groups of kids in team sports, one of our 6 rules, right? So we've tried to make that uniform between club sports and extracurricular activities at the schools. Now, we're getting a lot of questions about, well, what about graduations for seniors?
Just one of the many questions that people are asking. Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to the 4th edition of a special weekly series on Consider This, COVID-19. Today's focus, education and remote learning. We will hear from 2 guests, University of Nebraska's president and Nebraska's Education Commissioner. Let's begin with the latter. Dr. Matthew Bloomstead joins us via Zoom. Good morning, sir, and welcome.
Good morning, Kathy.
Before we get started with the questions, tell us a little bit about the Nebraska Department of Education.
Yeah, sure. The Department of Education obviously is a state agency. It actually has an elected state board of education that actually hires the commissioner of education. So my role is to oversee that, but also interestingly enough that the Department of Education, obviously with that education missions part of that, but we also have vocational rehabilitation and disability determination systems underneath us. So we have roughly 500 employees working across the state. Our mission statement is to lead and support the preparation of all Nebraskans for learning, earning, and living. And I think that really encompasses the leadership role that the Department of Education requires to have within the state.
And what about you, sir? What's important to know about you, especially during these unprecedented times?
Yeah, first of all, I'm, like many folks, I'm very proud to be a lifelong Nebraskan, raised in the southwest corner of the state in a small community, and really just grew up loving this state and loving education. And I couldn't ask for a better role or responsibility as commissioner. But obviously, this moment in time presents many different challenges for leadership, for us to think about how we can advance education and advance the state at these challenging times. And so I'm a father as well. I have 5 children, all school age. My oldest is a senior, my youngest is a 4th grader. I think every day about what's happening in our classrooms and with our citizens across the state and the challenges that they face. I care very deeply about this state, and I know very much, and I really am inspired in these moments because there's so much to work for and so much to protect in the people of our state.
Yeah, and so much for everybody to be thinking about right now. Of course, one of the most pressing issues is graduation and high school commencements. What's the short answer to that, Doctor?
Well, the short answer, I think, and it may be a challenging answer for many, but the short answer is the safest environment right now are virtual environments for graduations or any type of large gathering. We are hopeful that in the summer that there'll be a chance to do those physical gatherings. I know we've had conversations across the state, but the short answer is really the safest environment right now is virtual and waiting till after May 31st for larger gatherings of people. And I'm again very hopeful that we'll be able to see some of that come to fruition later this summer. As a father who has a graduating senior, it's a regular question in our household too, or had been anyway, and we've come to grips with that as being a reality too.
Okay, I want to go back a little bit when news of the school building closures came down the pike. It seemed as though we were hearing more about breakfast and lunch programs rather than the academic piece. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I actually think it was really a critical part of that. We realized that schools across the state feed children twice a day in these time frames, and missing that opportunity for food in households is actually a very critical part of the mission. I've told folks recently that if all we did was provide school meals twice a day, potentially twice a day to nearly 300,000 students, that would be a pretty significant part of our work. I think it was really critical that we provided food security for our families across the state, for our students across the state. It was really important part of our mission. I believe the reality as we worked with the U.S. Department of Agriculture that we've provided a lot of different chances to create some flexibility around feeding programs and food programs, but it's actually a very important part of what takes place in a school on a daily basis. And so that food security was critical, kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Housing and food are very high on concerns for people in a crisis.
Socialization also a very important component when it comes to learning. What would you advise folks to do, those students to do, to kind of bridge that social distancing gap during all of this, Doctor?
Yeah, it's really, I think, probably the challenge for everyone, and students not exempt from that challenge. We talk so much about how much perhaps kids are on social media or working in those formats, but they miss their friends, right? They miss their chance to connect with their classmates, but also with their teachers and counselors and other important folks in their day-to-day lives normally. And so it's not unusual to see a special relationship build between a school bus driver and a student, that says hi or gives them a high five as they're getting on a bus. It's not unusual for us to see that same type of relationship with adults in our school buildings with students. And so they're missing that right now. And so that's really a challenge. I know our teachers around the state are trying to connect with students in meaningful ways beyond the educational responsibilities, but just checking in and seeing how families are doing and seeing how our students are doing and providing hopefully some opportunities for some interconnection between students in classes and otherwise. And so we've seen some great things. It's obviously a challenge and we're still learning from these moments, but finding ways to keep those connections is a critical part of any child's growing up experience. And so we want to recognize that we continue to work on those fronts and continue to find ways that folks can have a meaningful social experience in this kind of distant approach as well.
Yeah, technology, very important piece of that, not just for the socialization aspect, but also for the learning piece in this. And yet there are some folks who don't have access to technology and or don't really understand it as well as they would like to. How would you address those students and their families who are watching right now, who are really feeling like maybe they're falling behind the curve because of that lack of access or lack of understanding when it comes to technology?
Yeah, I think there's actually kind of several layers to the technology issue. One is obviously one of just pure access to the devices and to the really the connection that's necessary. Certainly broadband has become a substantial issue for folks in this time, that we're all connecting through various means that are using technology. But what I would say also that we've built a system that is from an education standpoint, in some places we've had kind of that more integrated as part of their daily routine. In other places it wasn't so much. And it's been a challenging time for some students and families and teachers alike relative to the use of technology, given whether or not they have access at home for broadband, whether or not they have devices that are equipped, and whether or not the content that's being delivered over those devices is actually helping engage and be part of a meaningful and robust education environment. And so we are seeing challenges that I think schools are trying to overcome. I think I've seen some great things just recently where Omaha Public Schools is working on ensuring that every student and household has a device that's enabled with some type of LTE, some type of wireless connectivity. I think that's critical. Even at a national level, this has become a real dialogue because not all of the educational content is available to all learners. So when we think about students with disabilities and students with other barriers to meaningful use of that technology and meaningful use of that content. It's critical that we're thinking through all of those different aspects, and we really are. And I'm seeing some great things out of schools, but this hit us very quickly, right? In a period of 4 to 6 weeks, we've really ended up having to change what education looks like in these remote settings. Schools have done a remarkable job, and I intend to use these summer months coming up to really improve our robust nature of digital learning and access and address those types of challenges as we go forward.
With all the uncertainties that we are experiencing right now, talk to us a little bit about how you think COVID-19 might impact homeschooling.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating, and we've had some nice outreach from homeschool leaders, especially actually in Omaha and in that area. And our team, we have a responsibility for homeschools, by the way, as well. So I always like to say I'm the Commissioner of Education for all students across the state of Nebraska. So that includes public schools and private schools, but also includes our homeschool students. So every student in the state of Nebraska comes underneath the responsibility of the Department of Education. What I really think is an opportunity for us to share some best practices. I think homeschools have done a great job, and those that are really been organized for a while have a chance to kind of intersect and help parents understand what that environment might look like. I think in the long run, there's also a chance to use resources and share resources more effectively across the whole state. That digital content doesn't have to be recreated over and over and over again. And instead, we can find a set of content that we can share kind of holistically. I think our homeschools, in many cases, people think, well, they were obviously ready for this environment. Well, I don't think any family or households left without disruptions in this setting. And I'm pretty certain our homeschool environments are also kind of questioning how do they address the types of challenges that they may face, because they might have been using trips, from a family perspective to, businesses or other places. And those things are disrupted right now as well. So I think everyone has a sense of that disruption, but I actually see some real opportunities to even be closer as a state and work together to serve our students and educate our next generation more effectively. Talk
to me a little bit, Dr. Blumstead, about the next several months to come here. I know you don't have a crystal ball, but talk with the students, the teachers and the parents. What should we be doing in the next few months to make sure that we as a state stay ahead of the curve despite COVID-19?
Yeah, I think for us, I mean, it's this balancing act, right? That certainly no one has a crystal ball as far as what the effects of this will be or how long this will exactly impact us. But I think there's many things that we're starting to learn in this environment of how we get back to some sense of normalcy on what we do. What are the types of things that we can think about from a school setting? One thing I've talked to administrators from across the state about really convening conversations about what are the challenges that we face and how can we collectively address those. And so I'll be working with what I call my commissioners advisory group and expanding on that to ensure that we have a process in which we can understand what are the best strategies for us in this environment? How do we move forward? And so between now and this kind of the middle of this summer, we'll have a good sense of what this may look like as we kind of reach the fall. I've been out there publicly saying I expect disruptions. I don't know what those disruptions will look like. I don't know that they'll look like they're statewide. It could be regionally. It could be, site by site or district by district. But I think we need to really be thoughtful about preparing for all those possibilities, really putting in an environment that includes distance education and remote learning as we've had, but be prepared to be able to move between those environments if necessary. And I hope that's not necessary. I wish my crystal ball was a little clearer than that, but we'll continue to work on that. I think there's really some thoughtful leadership going on around the state. And again, I think we're advantaged by being the size of state that we are, the chance to really engage with one another. And so I really look forward to, providing some leadership in that space and working with many others in this time.
Dr. Matthew Blumstead with the Nebraska Department of Education, we want to thank you for joining us today. We want to put up more information for our viewers. Nebraska Department of Education, their phone number 402-471-2295, or you can log on education.ne.gov. On to higher education now, and Ted Carter. Ted is the president of the University of Nebraska. He also joins us via Zoom. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Kathy. Good to be with you today.
President Carter, let's start by having you kind of paint a picture of the university system, including the number of students who are currently enrolled.
Well, we are a four-campus system with campuses at Lincoln, at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, the Cornhuskers. Obviously, our metropolitan campus at University of Nebraska at Omaha, the Mavericks. Our medical center, UNMC, and then our rural campus out of University of Nebraska at Kearney. It's 51,000 students across those main campuses and a little over 16,000 faculty, staff, employees.
Wow, and you came on board in January, just as news of the pandemic was breaking. What were your thoughts at that time, and how are your skills and experiences helping you address the situation?
Well, as a lot of your viewers may know, I interviewed in October and went through kind of a statewide vetting process in November, spent a lot of time on campuses and a lot of the cities and towns throughout the state of Nebraska. So like most Americans, no idea that we would be entering into a pandemic in 2020. Even as I entered into the new job on January 1st of this year, we were already starting to think about what our 5-year strategy would look like, how we would grow the university, speak to the value of education, and help our students find their place in the employment market here in Nebraska. Towards the end of January, early February, the reality of what COVID-19 might mean started to hit us. Obviously, with our national leading medical center right there in Omaha, we had some wonderful briefings from Dr. Jeff Gold, Dr. Chris Cradaville. So that resource was vital for us to not only give us an idea of what we'd be doing for COVID-19 on our campuses, but helping advise the governor and all facets of our state of Nebraska, even all the way up to the White House. So we have been a central part of that. I would tell you that, coming out of 38 years of being active duty in the Navy, certainly gave me, some background in how to deal with a crisis, but nothing really like this. This is different than anything I have really dealt with in my military career, but there are some similar challenges that do come into play. I mean, leadership is still leadership. Getting all the best facts that you can have, making sure that you take care of the health and welfare of our students, our families, our communities first, but also have an eye on making sure that we can continue to do the mission, which we have worked very hard at, and we have done that. So we've continued on with the education mission by going to remote education. We'll be, graduating the class of 2020 on all 4 of our campuses here in May. Not exactly the way we had envisioned it, but I think we will have accomplished that academic mission very successfully. And now we're in the planning process for not just what to do this summer, but what will we look like and do in the fall. So lots of work here, certainly not what I expected it to be when I first signed up for the job, but I can tell you every day that I'm here is a validation that I'm where I'm supposed to be.
President Carter, what is the highest priority for you right now?
The highest priority right now is to make sure that we have the health and welfare of our students, our faculty, our staff, but a close second to that is to make sure that our university system is vibrant, that it's ready to do its mission. We are one of the largest employers in the state of Nebraska. We are a key and essential part of higher education for the entire state of Nebraska. So to make sure that we are preparing for what will probably be some very limited resources going forward, we'll be prepared to make those hard decisions once we get a better picture of the economic outlook. So that's where a lot of our focus is right now.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, given all the uncertainties, how do you even begin to address something like that? I mean, we're in the throes of it right now, and you still need to look out and be strategic, right?
Yeah, well, I would share with you that my previous experience of being an active duty naval officer, commanding ships and carriers and squadrons at sea, being in combat operations and preparing for a crisis, one of the things that I learned is, hope is not a course of action. The fog of war is real. You'll never have all of the details of information in your hand to make a decision on a daily, weekly, or even forecasting out into the near term and the long term that you'd like to have. Yeah. So that's kind of the situation we're in. Some people are calling it the COVID-19 fog. It's hard to predict, what will have happened as we look back 4 weeks ago to where we are today, it's hard to predict what we'll be in 2 weeks, 3 months, or a year from now. But yet we have to plan for all those eventualities. So we are doing that. We're doing some things to make sure that we're smart with our financial decisions. We're going to be making some more financial planning across our campuses. And yes, it's challenging, and the reality of where we are is difficult. The one thing I've learned here is communication is key. So whether it's my communication with our Board of Regents, our elected officials that are oversight for the University of Nebraska, our chancellors, our deans, our faculty senates, our students, their families, the governor, the mayors of Omaha and Lincoln, across the entire state, and to include our K-12 education commissioner, we're all interconnected. Decisions that we make affect everyone.
Yeah. I want to change gears now and talk about this remote learning. How did the teachers, the instructors, within the university system, how do you think they segued into online learning?
Well, the first thing I would just say is how proud I am of the entire breadth of our faculty across all 4 of our campuses. And that includes, by the way, the Nebraska College of Technical Agriculture, as well as our extension educators that are almost kind of like our 5th and 6th campus tied to the Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources at University of Nebraska-Lincoln. You take a look across the entire enterprise, we had 2 great things going for us. First is the one IT system. So a lot of people may not know that as we became a university system, going all the way back about 3 years ago, we started to integrate all of the siloed IT networks into one. We're not 100% across all the campuses, but we're about 95%. So that was a huge, huge benefit to us. The second is almost all of our campuses deal extensively with some version of online education. A lot of our faculty who teach in the classroom also taught online. Now, for those that are viewing here, there's kind of 2 different elements here to remote education. As we transitioned to that after our spring break, we went to remote education, which is not exactly the same as online education. So online education is kind of asynchronous, meaning that the faculty member will take a bunch of products, whether it be a PowerPoint presentation, a YouTube video, something recorded, or some other presentation, and we'll hang that in the cloud or put that somewhere where the student can go get it at their time. The remote education that we've been involved in for many of our students has continued to be what we call synchronous education. So even though it's happening remotely, it's happening real time with a faculty member who may be on a similar call like we're using here, Zoom technology, Skype, Google Hangouts, FaceTime, whatever they're using, but it's happening real time. So you are actually tied to that same clock with the educator to get that in-person, even though virtual, education. And of course, some of the tools that are out there that have advanced us and allowed us to be able to do that, and there's more that we can do, and we're exploring what that might look like, because whether we're all back in the classroom in the fall or whether we are complete remote education, we're going to have to continue to advance the technology so that we can take advantage of some of the virtual capabilities to make it feel a little bit more experiential. So this is really an important part of the future of education because it's going to change. Even if we are in the classroom in the fall, there will be some percentage of students, whether they be in the state of Nebraska, outside the state, or even our international partners, that are going to want some online or remote education. So we want to continue to make sure we're getting that right.
President Carter, I want you to talk specifically now to those students. We like to think that they're all tech savvy because they're students, but there really are those young people who want to be in a classroom setting. They thrive in that type of situation. Please talk to those students who might be concerned that COVID-19 has put a glitch in their learning and could possibly hinder their grades and maybe even their futures. What would you say to those students?
Well, I'd say to them all, please keep faith with us. We have only your interests at heart. I came into this job with the idea that our students are the #1 priority. They are our customer. They are why we exist. And I still have that mindset, whether it be however mechanism we deliver our education mission, we're going to continue to make it vibrant, relevant, and allow them to use the skills that they get to be able to go into and be successful in the workforce. Now, I would also agree with a lot of students that want the on-campus experience. As we look at what we can do either through remote or online education, we can do the academic part of that mission. And I think we can actually do it quite well. But what we really can't do with online programs is give you the full experience of an on-campus education. This is where you're going to grow in other ways. This is where you're going to grow emotionally, socially, to get that way of growing and maturing that is different than what you can just get by educating in an apartment or somebody else's home. So we want you back on our campus. We are going to do everything we can to make sure that the environment is safe and that we can bring you back. We look to be making an announcement sometime in the future about what our plans are for the fall. I am optimistic that we will have the resources, the talent, and the data that will look at the science and make it as safe as possible for everyone to return to our campus. We may even be leading some of that discussion nationwide, partially because of the benefits that we have at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. So we are going to lean on them. We're going to look at the science. Our state has done a very good job thus far in how we've handled COVID-19. Yes, there are some hot spots out there, but even in Omaha and Lincoln right now, remarkable progress on where we're seeing with the numbers. So again, I'm optimistic. Keep faith with us. The higher education mission is going to continue to be relevant right here in Nebraska.
Okay, in about the minute we have remaining, finally here, the promise, the Nebraska promise. Just briefly tell us about that program.
So it aligns exactly with what I was saying. Our education mission is about the students. This is about affordability and accessibility. As I stated before, I will do everything I can to make sure that we can get as many students to come into our seats and graduate on time and go into the workforce right here in Nebraska. It was an existing program called College Bound Nebraska, mostly focused on Pell Grant eligible students at the lower income level and their families. This just upped it a little bit more to allow students to get tuition-free education here in our university system for families who adjusted gross income is $60,000 a year or less. That's right at the median income level for Nebraska. That will up our student availability through this program about 25% statewide. So we're excited about the possibility. We've seen applications for that program go up about 25% across all campuses. So it's being very well received. I'm very excited about it. President Ted Carter, University of Nebraska, thank you so much for joining us to talk COVID-19 education and remote learning. Folks wanting more information can go to University of Nebraska, nebraska.edu. I want to thank you all for joining us today. We will see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at netnebraska.org/considerthis. If you'd like to share your comments about this program, call UNO Television at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or send an email to cwyatt@unomaha.edu.